With Thomas Savage with the American Institute for Economic Research, and Pete Sepp is the president of the National Taxpayers Union. Guys, happy Friday and welcome. We're going to learn more about Harris's plans for the economy. She's focusing on the high cost of living for the majority of Americans. In North Carolina today, the first major policy speech, New York Times giving us a preview of what it includes, and it's this: combating price gouging at the grocery store, construction of more affordable housing, expanded tax credit for parents, and lower cost of prescription drugs. Thomas, it's nice to hear these plans, but of course we're wondering how this actually happens. Your read on what we can hear from the vice president today.
Well, with what's been previewed, it all sounds good, but it doesn't work. President Trump really hit the nail on the head there. We've seen that price controls don't work. When we're talking about tax credits, you want to look at the big picture here. A tax credit is a provision in the tax code that requires Americans to jump through hoops to maybe lower their tax bill or get a little bit of their money back. But Vice President Harris hasn't talked about extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So even if you give away all these tax credits, if you let the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expire, more taxes are going to get raised across the board for every American, and the cost of living is not going to get any cheaper.
Yeah, Pete, that was seemingly it's Trump's sweet spot, right? That he's a businessman for decades and decades, and he says, I would even go along with the plan, but it doesn't work, and we already know why it doesn't work. And he goes on to explain it in a couple sentences there. I just wanted to hear your makeup on this. Again, many are focusing on the federal ban on price gouging, essentially price control on groceries. Yes. Where does that lead America?
Pretty ridiculous. That's where Harris's vulnerable spot is. I mean, take a look at the profitability of grocery stores. They're actually below the average for the rest of corporate America. So there's no price gouging going on there. And the fact that prices have risen due to market conditions, well, government itself is responsible for creating a lot of these bad market conditions, creating energy shortages that raise prices. Well, it costs money to refrigerate food, to transport food. That's going to be built into the price increases. And as for taxes, yeah, absolutely right. Why not simply focus on extending full expensing for research and development, full write-offs for investments in plants and equipment, making sure the standard deduction stays at its elevated level so people have an easier and simpler time of doing their taxes. Instead, government creates problems, and then government creates more programs to solve those problems. Why not simply cut that cycle off and let people keep more of their own money?
Great point. She says she wants to lower prices on day one of her administration, but she's not doing it today in the Biden-Harris administration. A lot of people take an issue with that. Thomas Savage, Pete Sepp, gentlemen, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, President Biden.